I've taken it upon myself to educate and open the eyes of people in my community to understand exactly what they are getting themselves into when they buy a leasehold property. I talk a lot about property on all my pages, Instagram, TikTok, and here on YouTube. And my most popular video here on YouTube was talking about the property that I bought, which was a leasehold property, and how I regretted buying it. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I'm going to link it somewhere here in this video. Today, I'm going to dig deeper into a leasehold agreement where you can see all the parties involved and what the terms and conditions look like for somebody who's buying a leasehold property. I had a friend who reached out to me and had me look into his leasehold agreement after watching my videos, and he has given me the permission to talk about his leasehold agreement for me to give you the chance to see exactly what is going on here when you decide to buy a leasehold property. If you ask me, I will not encourage anyone in the UK at this point to buy a leasehold property. I will 100% favor a freehold property if you're looking to buy your first home, or look for properties that are share of freehold, which gives you ownership to a structure that looks like a flat in a building, but you also own a slice of the freehold with the other people that live in the property. Without much ado, let's delve right into it. So this is the leasehold agreement. It's about 100 pages or something like that. And I want to highlight the things in there that make me uncomfortable, because how I see it is, if you have a mortgage, that means that you've gone to borrow about £400,000, about £350,000, somewhere within that range, to exchange for ownership of a property, with your mindset being that you own that property. And if after that, the contract you've signed has all these terms and conditions in there, when that money could have bought another property, which could be a freehold property, and all these restrictions just vanish. Let's get into it. So here, it talks about the property, what the person owns. And it says here that you own the floor and ceiling finishes, but nothing respectively below or above them. And for the avoidance of doubt, excluding any airspace above. 2. The whole of the internal walls and the inner half severed medially of the walls, dividing the property from any other part of the block. 3. The doors and door frame, and the windows and window frames, but not the exterior surfaces thereof. So you own the window, but you don't own the outside of the window. That part is not for you. 4. All service installations that exclusively serve the property, whether or not allocated therein, but for the avoidance of doubt, excluding any part of heat services infrastructure. And 5. All additions and improvements to the property made by the tenant. What I'm trying to say here is that the flat you've bought, only the internal part is for you. Technically, the external part of the flat, the bricks, the insulation in between your internal wall, like your plasterboard and the outside of the flat, the outside part of your window, all of that does not belong to you. It's not part of your property. What you own, what you've picked your money to buy, is just the internal part of the property and the fixtures and fittings in the property. Let's be aware. The next part of the contract I want us to talk about. So here they are talking about what you should not do. And this one stood out to me. So not to play or loiter in the internal common parts, and not to leave any bicycle, pushchair, or any other item in the internal common parts, except bicycles within the cycle store, if such is within internal common parts, or obstruct them in any way. So yeah, you've got the property, but when it comes to the communal areas, like, the hallway right in front of your door, that part is not for you. You can't loiter about, you can't play, you can't do anything there. Your kids can't make noise there. It's not for you. Don't venture. And then the next one I see is not to use the property as a serviced apartment, as a bed and breakfast, for short-term holiday or vacation rentals, or occupations, provided that long-term holiday or vacation rentals or occupations which are for fixed periods exceeding 3 months shall be permitted. For the provision of any hospitality service which provides overnight accommodation to paying guests. So this is one of the ones that a lot of people talk about on the internet, that they can't use their flats for Airbnb. But here it states that if you're using the flat for paying guests who are staying for more than 3 months, it's allowed. all in all, most Airbnb guests, most short-term let gets are not going to stay for more than 3 months. So if at some point you're moving out or you're going on holiday and you're thinking, oh, I own this place, so I'm going to use it for Airbnb, that's out of the question. Now, I know a lot of you will come for me in the comments saying, oh, but when you do Airbnb in a flat, it's not advisable, it disturbs the neighbors and all that. My point is, if you have used your money of that much to buy a property, what you can use a property for should not be fully restricted by somebody else who has not paid for that property. The next one, to clean at least once each month the interior of the windows of the property. This is nice to have, and if you think about it, yeah, you should be cleaning your windows. My problem here is that it shouldn't be documented how often I should clean my windows, because the moment I don't clean my windows every month, I've breached the contract. If anything comes up and I'm taken to court and I cannot show that I clean my window every month, I have breached the contract. Like, when these things are written down, now it is a contract that you've signed. So the moment you decide not to do it, you are officially breaching the contract, and that could come with consequences if somebody decides to pursue. The next, not to install or permit to be installed in or on the property any solar panels. So let's say you get excited about reducing your electricity bills and you think, oh, there's this new technology where you can put solar panels on your balcony and that can help you reduce your electricity bill. That is out of the question. The next one that was intriguing to me, not to use the allocated parking space otherwise than for the parking of a single private motor vehicle or motorcycle which does not exceed 35 cwt gross laden weight and which shall be in a roadworthy condition, taxed and insured. Not to park in the allocated parking space or any part of the estate any commercial vehicle other than a light delivery van at reasonable times of the day for so long as may be reasonably necessary for the purpose of delivering goods to and collecting goods from the property or carrying out repairs, maintenance, decoration, or small building works to the property, such vehicle to be parked on the allocated parking space. So they're telling you that you can't have a commercial vehicle parked in the allocated parking space that they've given you. What if you're a workman and your vehicle is a normal van? That means that that allocated parking space cannot be for you, because when you're allowed to put your vehicle there is when you are asking somebody to come and do some work for you. It's too restricted, if you get my point. For someone who has bought a property, it's too restricted. Next, not at any time to carry on or permit to be carried on upon the property any trade or business whatsoever, other than office work at home, which is not inconsistent with exclusive residential occupation. Not to use or permit the same to be used for any purpose other than as permitted use. So you can't use your property for any form of business. If you are a baker and you decide to bake from home, this is not allowed. So that means, let's say nobody catches you, you do it. If for any reason you are taken to court, you've breached the rules. Let's say you make clothing. If you decide to make clothing in that home, it's not allowed. Like, that's your home. Next, not to hang or expose or permit to be hung or exposed any clothes or other articles outside the property. Yeah, you can't hang your clothes on the balcony. Simple. You can't hang your clothes in the property. So you have to buy a washer dryer, and if you're not using it and they catch you, they can take you to court, and that will be a breach of contract. The last one I'll talk about here is around the service charge. So it says here that to pay the rent on demand, to pay the tenant's proportion of estate service charge costs, and all existing and future rates, assessments, charges, and outgoings of every kind and description payable by law in respect of the property or any parts thereof, and whether by the owner, lesser tenant, or occupier thereof, and to pay a fair and reasonable proportion of any such expenses which are assessed or charged on the estate or any premises, of which the property forms only parts, provided that this paragraph shall exclude any charge payable to the head landlord under the head lease. All they are saying is, we are going to give you a service charge and you are going to pay it on demand. There's no safeguard as to how big the service charge can be or how small it can be. If it keeps increasing, your responsibility is to pay it on demand. And this is the big thing here. Because I asked this person who lives in this property what their service charge has been. And they've been living here for 3 years. I'll show you the details of what their service charge has been. The first year, they paid £3,100 for their service charge. The second year, they paid £3,400 for their service charge. The third year, they paid £5,200 for their service charge. There is no safeguard boundary around how big or small the service charge is going to be. So as and when the management company shows up and gives you a bill, you have to pay on demand. And there are people in this person's property who couldn't afford the service charge, especially in the third year, and they've been given a CCJ because they haven't paid their service charge. And now they are complaining that they can't afford the place. Now the next thing I wanted to ask when I read this document is, if the owner, the landlord, right, the owner of the freehold has made all these rules and restrictions about the property that I've bought, which I think is fair because, see, you're living with other people in a big complex. You shouldn't just be given the opportunity to do anything and everything that you want, right? My question is, how much is the landlord paying, or how much has the landlord paid to be able to be in the position to make all these rules for me? You know what the answer to that question is? Nothing. Because one, the exterior walls and windows and all those things I mentioned earlier, you've paid for it when you bought the property. I can assure you of that. Secondly, the landlord is in charge of beautifying the area, plants, cleaning the windows from the outside, maintenance of the communal areas, and all of that stuff. All those, even though the landlord is the one dictating what happens, all those are bundled together and charged to all the tenants living in the area as service charge. So the landlord has no financial obligation. The financial obligation fully sits on all the tenants in the area or all the tenants in the property, and the landlord is the one making all the decisions. I don't think that's fair. This is the part where I want you to pay attention, because all of this in this video is not to say that nobody should buy a leasehold property per se. It's not to say that we are being duped. It's to say that this is a rental, and we need to make people aware that when you decide to buy a leasehold property, it is a rental where you are not protected by the Renters' Rights Bill. Let me explain. So you've indirectly rented the place for how long the lease is. Here, the leasehold for this particular property is 999 years. Yay. But you have risked your credit to go and get a mortgage to fund the building that the owner, the freeholder, whoever, the developer built, right? Because there in no way is the owner paying for some parts of it, or the developer or the freeholder paying for any part of it. All the tenants or all the leaseholders are the ones that have paid fully for the place. Secondly, in a normal rental, you have a fixed amount that the landlord has asked you to pay every month, which also probably includes all the cost of running the place, right? But with that, there's usually a contract of like a year or two. Now with the Renters' Rights Bill, the tenants can leave by giving a 2 months notice. But when it comes to leasehold, which is a nice rental with a bow tie on it as home ownership, you can't just up and leave. The only way you can exit is to sell the property. But unfortunately, a lot of people are becoming aware of what's happening with leasehold properties, especially with service charges and restrictions. So leasehold properties are not selling on the property market. Let's look at some data. This was an article written by The Guardian recently in June 2026, saying that according to research by Zoopla, the property search website, flats in England take 46 to 47 days to sell. In Scotland, where the long lease system does not apply, the average selling time is 16 days. So now you are caught up in this arrangement, which is a rental that you funded with your credits and your mortgage. And when you want to sell it, because other people are now becoming very aware of what's going on, the ease of selling is gradually reducing. So you can't behave like a tenant who can just give 2 months notice and say, I won't do anymore. You have to wait for somebody to buy it off of you. And if you're in a position where nobody is giving you an offer on that property, it's going to be a problem. Let me talk about the service charges. Because if it's a normal rental, you are capped, your exposure is capped to what you've agreed with your landlord as your rent. And also, there are now restrictions on how often and how landlords can increase rents for tenants in the Renters' Rights Bill. But you don't have that when it comes to service charge. The other information or data that I want to talk about is this article I found from the Hamptons, which says many leaseholders have seen the economic efficiencies of sharing a single roof with their neighbors steadily eroded by rising running costs. Traditionally, the cost of running a flat has been below what owners of houses spend over the long term. However, in recent years, large increases in management and compliance costs that aren't paid by homeowners have upset the equilibrium. Our analysis shows that the average leaseholder in England and Wales paid a service charge of £2,400 a year. Over the last 5 years, the average charge has risen by 32.6%. Let that sink in. What is inflation? For service charge to rise by 32%. Let that sink in. What I want to sink in today is, if you own a leasehold flat, look into your lease, make sure you understand the restrictions, test the market, see how easily you can sell it or not. And if you're going to be stuck in that arrangement for a long time, have a buffer to be paying your service charge. If you're looking to buy your first home, I will strongly advise you consider a freehold property or you consider a share of freehold property. Thank you for watching. If you like my vibe, subscribe to my channel. It's been Abigail.